Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Carrie, and I work on marketing here at Family Matters. And before we get started today, I'd like to take just a minute or two to talk a little bit about what we do. We are a family-owned and operated in-home care company with 3 locations throughout California. We have more than 300 caregivers who work with our clients either in their homes or the facility where they live. And our team really does their very best to make sure it's a great match between client and caregiver based on the client's needs and personality. Caregivers assist clients with daily activities ranging from personal care to meal preparation and light housekeeping. They help get them to and from appointments. They assist with physical rehabilitation routines and provide companionship. Also, our caregivers receive ongoing training in dementia and Alzheimer's care, so they are prepared to work with people who might be experiencing different levels of cognitive decline. Okay, we will send some follow-up information about our services after the presentation. Also, after the webinar, we will send out an email in the next day or so with a link to the recording. Last housekeeping item before we get going. If you have any questions or comments during the webinar, go ahead and throw them in the chat or the Q&A, and we will make sure to have some time at the end of the presentation for Tammy to go over them. Okay, I will pass things over to our speaker today, Tammy, and I'll allow her to introduce herself.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, everybody, for attending today's webinar on dementia-friendly communication tips. As Carrie mentioned, my name is Tammy Anastasia. I am a dementia consultant, educator, and the author of Essential Strategies for the Dementia Caregiver, Learning to Pace Yourself. I also have a private practice, and I provide counseling, dementia guidance, emotional support, and care strategies to family and professional caregivers. And I facilitate several caregiver support groups throughout the Bay Area. So today I am going to focus on dementia-friendly communication tips. And I'm going to begin my presentation by going over the progression of dementia. So first, what is dementia? Dementia is a progressive physiological degenerative brain disease, and currently there is no cure. So what it essentially is saying is it causes brain damage and it causes shrinkage in the brain, and there is no current cure. So the rate of progression is going to vary from person to person, but dementia progresses. It will only get worse over time. There'll be periods where they'll plateau, but know that right now that it does progress. And also the rate of progression varies, and there's over 100 different types of dementia. So that's good to know. Also, dementia affects the part of the brain that controls our thoughts, memory, and language. And it affects the ability to think rationally and process information logically. And as this disease progresses, dementia affects the ability to care for oneself physically and perform daily activities such as brushing your teeth, dressing, toileting, and bathing. And people with dementia do not have control over the things they say and do. This is a critical piece of information to keep in mind, because you have a relationship with your loved one pre-dementia, and they might have been manipulative, or they might have held the truth from you, or they might have done things that annoyed you, and now they have dementia. And you're going to think they're still doing those things. But once they get a diagnosis of dementia, you need to know they truly, truly do not have control over the things they say and do. So, and the more you understand that, the more patient you'll be with yourself as well as your loved one, realizing they don't have control over the things they say and do. So because of how dementia affects the brain is going to cause problems with communication. So dementia is going to affect communication in many ways. Short-term memory loss. They're not going to remember things you said or things they did minutes or seconds ago. It causes increased confusion. And they'll have, again, inability to think rationally. So trying to reason with them is not the best thing to do because they're not able to process that information. And they will repeat themselves over and over and over. And again, these are all symptoms of dementia. Also, they are not aware of their limitations. This is really important to understand. A lot of times, my private clients will share with me that they feel their loved one is in denial. And what you need to be aware of is that dementia, if it does any damage to the frontal part of the brain, then that is where self-awareness is stored. If there's damage to that part of the brain, they have no ability, they're not capable of being aware of their limitations. As a matter of fact, there's a medical term called anosognosia, ANOSOGNOSIA. So if you're trying to convince your loved one to see their limitations, it's going to deplete your energy and you're going to get very frustrated. And then it causes a lot of tension between you and your loved one. So super important to be aware of that 60 to 80% of people with dementia have what is called anosognosia. They do not have the capability or the awareness to be aware of their limitations, no matter how much you try to point them out to them. And then they will ruminate or fixate on situations. This often occurs. There's themes to when they do that, and it often occurs when they may not be stimulated enough, their brain may not be engaged enough, and then they start to ruminate and fixate on situations. Also, they will live in the past. So what you need to keep in mind about this is that they may relive past memories. So as though it's happening today. The brain cells, the information that gets transferred gets distorted, and they will get things confused. They may say and do things that are inaccurate. You may hear stories that never happened, but they may be stories that happened when they were a kid. So you need to be very aware that they may relive past memories as though they're occurring today. So if there's any trauma, any abuse, any abandonment issues, trust issues, there's a high likelihood they're going to relive those experiences. Also, dementia affects they'll have difficulty with reading and writing, and they will lack initiation. This can be really frustrating because a lot of times you may ask your loved one to do something and they won't budge. And the lack of initiation is a symptom of dementia. Apathy is a huge symptom of dementia. So they're not being stubborn. They're not being uncooperative to annoy you. They truly have lost that ability to be self-starters, to motivate themselves, and or to initiate doing anything. And then you may see personality changes. That is going to be a symptom of dementia. And then an inability to censor or filter the things they say and do. So they may say things that are very inappropriate, embarrassing, incorrect, but here again, they do not have control over the things they say and do as the brain, it gets damaged. And then they may become accusatory. So think of accusatory. It would almost make sense that they would become accusatory. Let me give you an example. I clean my office, I file papers, I put papers away, and I can't remember where I put a piece of paper. But what I do remember is that I was the last one who had that paper. I do remember, but think now, if I don't remember I had that piece of paper, my default is going to be someone else must have taken it. When I was a kid, I used to play a lot of sports. And I would leave my dirty clothes on the bed thinking after I come back home from playing with my friends, I'll throw the dirty clothes in the laundry. Well, sometimes I'd come back in my room and the dirty clothes aren't on my bed. My mother took them and put them in the laundry. But imagine if I didn't have that recall, it makes sense that I would think somebody else moved it. So know that that's sort of the brain's natural tendency is they will accuse you of things because they don't remember they're the ones who had the item last. So they're not accusing you on purpose to blame you they're accusing you because it's the brain's default. Well, if I didn't touch it, if I didn't have it, it makes sense. They will also become argumentative when you try to correct them, when you try to over-explain things to them, rationalize with them, reason with them. They truly, truly, truly believe what their brain tells them. And the more you try to argue, correct them, and over-explain, here again, I can create a lot of tension between you and your loved one. So we want to try to avoid doing that. And I'll talk about ways to avoid doing that. And then they will become combative. And they'll become combative when they don't understand why you're doing something. Imagine if you were somewhere and then all of a sudden someone came after you, charged after you. We have a defense mechanism, and our defense mechanism is to protect ourselves. So you know your intentions are good. You know your intentions are good. You know you're trying to help them. But if their brain doesn't understand how you're approaching them or the way you're approaching them, and they're feeling threatened, they're going to become combative, because that's our natural defense mechanism. So what's nice about being accusatory, argumentative, and combative? These are great opportunities for us to say to ourselves, uh-oh, I need to change my approach. I need to change what I am doing, because they can't change. So we are the ones who are going to have to learn how to adapt to them. Now, that being said, I don't expect anybody to be perfect by any means. As a matter of fact, I want you to be incredibly patient with yourselves as you learn new ways to communicate. Dealing with somebody with dementia really does require almost a brand new skill set. So I want each and every one of you to be very patient with yourselves. I'm going to be sharing a lot of information. I don't want you to walk away, beat yourselves up. I want you to use this as an opportunity to learn and develop new skills. Okay, so before I talk about ways to communicate with people with dementia, I want to go over, first of all, the pitfalls to avoid. First and foremost, do the best that you can. I don't expect anybody to be perfect, but try to reduce the arguing, rationalizing, correcting, and explaining. You also want to avoid trying to be right or being insistent or trying to prove a point. Again, their brain believes what their brain is telling them, and the brain is malfunctioning. And you have to remember that they don't have a normal brain anymore. And so it is deteriorating. The cells are shrinking. Therefore, they're going to say things that might be incorrect, but again, it's not intentional to annoy you. Try to not be forceful or insistent that they do things your way. The main thing is that both you and your loved one are safe. And as long as you and your loved one are safe, try not to be forceful or insistent that they do things your way, because it often will require us to be more patient with them and require adapting to their limitations. Also, try to avoid telling them no. And the way around that is focus more on the things they can do. So instead of saying, no, you can't do that, you might say, you know what would be more helpful? You know what would be absolutely great is if you could do A, B, and C instead. So capitalize on the things they can do and do the best you can to try avoid telling them no. Also, I would avoid, to the best of your ability, discussing upsetting topics. I kind of have this rule of thumb. If they don't ask, don't share. And if they do ask, share very, very, very little. Do the best you can to avoid discussing upsetting topics. Also, try to avoid asking open-ended questions. As the brain deteriorates, as dementia progresses, it becomes very difficult to answer open-ended questions such as, what do you want for dinner? They may not be able to answer that, and I'll talk about another way around that. Also avoid asking why or do you remember? Try not to test their memory. That's kind of like pouring salt into a wound, because they don't have control. They won't remember if they have short-term memory loss. And why they did something, they may not know why they did it. They did it because that's what their brain told them to do. So again, always safety first, but if they're safe, then try to avoid asking, why did you do that? Or don't you remember I told you that yesterday? You'll conserve your energy a lot by not testing their memory. Also, try not to remind them that they forget. Again, this is something that they have no control over. And if you really want to annoy somebody living with dementia, rush them. Try not to rush them. They are going to be slower. And if you're going to do doctor's appointments, I would suggest you do them late in the morning, because you're probably going to have to start getting the process going at least an hour or two, or maybe 3 hours before you go to that appointment. They slow down and they hate to be rushed. And some people have this ritual. They have to do certain things before they leave the house, which can drive you crazy. But know that that ritual is a way of giving them a sense of control, gives them a feeling of feeling safe and feeling secure. So try not to rush them. And this is much easier said than done. Try not to take what they say and do personally. Really remember, dementia is responsible for what you and your loved one are going through. Dementia is responsible for the changes that happen with your loved one. And just keep repeating that to yourself over and over, especially when you start to take what they say and do personally. I have this dementia mantra. Dementia is causing my loved one to behave this way. Dementia is causing my loved one to behave this way. And the more you say that, at some point, you'll have a shift in your thinking, and you really will see, you know what, dementia is responsible for their behavior and the things they say and do. So ways to counteract these pitfalls, I'm going to go over some calm dementia communication tips. CALM is an acronym that I came up with. So I'm going to go through what each of the letters are, as well as describe the strategies. So compassionate communication is C. Pay attention to your body language and pay attention to their body language. People living with dementia become very sensitive to our body language. They become very sensitive to our tone of voice and our facial expressions. As a matter of fact, their mood can change on a dime based on our body language. So what I'm suggesting is just try to be very mindful of your body language. And at the same time, at some point, as dementia progresses, they're going to lose the ability to communicate what their needs are clearly and directly. Start learning their body language now. Start reading what their body language is telling you. So as the disease progresses and they lose the ability to communicate directly, you might have a sense, because you've learned what their body language is saying, you might have a sense as to what the need might be when they can no longer communicate it directly. Also, replace saying you with we and us. Instead of saying it's time for you to put your pajamas on, it's time for you to take your medication, instead say it's time for us, because us and we increases cooperation. A person living with dementia hears you as singling them out. They process it as being punitive. And so when you say, oh boy, I sure am looking forward for when we go to the doctors, when it's time for us to go to the doctors, it really gives them a sense of belonging and a sense of connection. And it really, truly does increase cooperation. Also, you want to keep your questions and answers short. And you want to provide two choices. So remember earlier I said, try to avoid asking open-ended questions. And instead, you want to give them two choices, because we still want to give them the feeling of being independent and the feeling that they still have some control. So you might say, would you like bacon or eggs for breakfast? Would you like a sandwich? Or would you like a waffle for lunch? In other words, give them two choices so that they can select the choice rather than that open-ended question. It just really helps simplify the decision-making process. Also, and then when they ask you a question, keep your responses very short. Keep them short, short, short. The shorter, the better. You'll go down the river the more you talk, and you want to just, again, conserve your energy and keep your questions and answers short. Give them two choices. At some point, people will tell me their loved one is no longer even able to communicate what the choice might be. So at that point, we will just make the choice for them. You go to a restaurant, the menu can be hugely overwhelming. They can't read it. They don't know what they want. And you might say, oh, you know what? I know we both enjoy salmon, so I'm going to order salmon for you and I'll order salmon for myself. So we'll simplify that process by choosing something you know they do enjoy for them. Also, speak slower. People living with dementia, it takes a little longer for them to process information. And you don't want to do it disrespectfully, but you do want to just slow down a little bit and take your time when you're talking to them, so it gives them time to process the information. And give them time to process the information. It takes longer for them to process information. As a matter of fact, they'll get very agitated and irritable if you're talking too fast. And again, read their body language. One of the best things we have going for us is that their behavior will cue us in on what it is we need to know. So if you start seeing them getting agitated, think, well, maybe am I talking too fast? Also, provide verbal and visual cues. At some point, they're going to lose that ability to process what you might be saying verbally, but a visual cue might kick in what it is you want them to do. It might be a good reference source that might, oh, okay, gives them a heads up as to what you're trying to communicate to them. And then make eye contact. Very, very, very important. When we're talking with people living with dementia, very important to make eye contact with them. Don't ask them to do things if their back is to you or your back is to them. And if they're standing, you want to be standing. If they're sitting, you want to be sitting at their level. Super important to make that eye contact. And when in doubt, because I will tell you, you will get frustrated. You will get angry. You will get impatient. You're not going to be perfect. When in doubt, just walk away. Again, make sure your loved one is safe. Walk away, collect yourself, come back when you're ready. And if you do lose it, because you will, then simply apologize. I'm sorry that I got upset. I'm sorry that I was impatient. I'm sorry goes a long, long way. The A in the CALM acronym stands for acknowledge their thoughts, feelings, concerns, and fears. And there is a process for this. Number one is you need to validate what you hear them say. Almost paraphrase, repeat back to them what you hear them telling you. This is super, super, super important. Every person, dementia or not, we all want to feel heard and understood. One of the best ways to do that is to simply paraphrase or repeat after them using the same words what you hear them telling you. Step two is then we have to empathize with them. Imagine putting yourself in their shoes. What would you want to be told if you believed what they believe? What would you want to be told if you had said something, and even if it was incorrect, what would you want to be told? So you want to provide a reassuring and comforting response. And then step three is to distract them. But I have to honestly say, if we jump over the validation, if we skip providing that reassuring, comforting response, it's going to be very difficult to redirect them and distract them. So it's very important that you validate first, empathize, provide that reassuring, comforting response, and then we gently try to redirect. And redirecting involves either bringing up topics or getting them engaged in activities that you know they enjoy, that make them happy, that make them feel useful, productive, that they're good at, that they are successful at. So you may want to put like 6 to 8 different, have these 6 to 8 different activities up your sleeve so that you have them ready for when you need them. And then responses. So I'm going to go over some wonderful ways to validate and empathize with a person living with dementia. Thank you for letting me know how you feel. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. A beautiful way of communicating and validating that you hear what your loved one is telling you. Another one is to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that upset you. I'm sorry that you're frustrated. I'm sorry goes a long way, a very empathetic response. I'm apologizing. I can see you're upset. I know how frustrating this is for you. Those are some other phrases that are incredibly validating, very empathetic. Also, we're in this together. A lot of times I work with people with dementia as well, and they'll communicate to me that their biggest fear is that the loved one is going to leave them. They're very afraid of being left alone. They're afraid of being abandoned. And so sometimes you have to reassure them and say, we're in this together. I'm going nowhere. You're the love of my life. I love being with you. They need that reassurance that you're by their side. Also, earlier stages, this is one of my favorite that I use is, can you tell me more about? The more they can communicate to me, the better it is for me, because I gather more information. And the more information I get, the more I might be able to sort out the way I should respond or the way I need to respond that would be reassuring and comforting. And what's lovely about that, can you share more? I'm showing an interest in what you're telling me. I'm showing an interest in what you're telling me. And at the same time, I'm gathering more information that's probably going to be very beneficial and useful for me to have. And then people with dementia, it's super important that you're going to resolve the issues for them. I will is a very proactive, I will do this on your behalf. And it's a wonderful way of saying, I hear what you're saying. I know what you're concerned about, and I will resolve it for you. I will take care of this for you. And then when in doubt, always tell them, I love you. I love you goes a long way as well. I love you no matter what we're going through. I do love you. And again, it gives them a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. And here again, it makes them feel very, very connected. So these are just some wonderful phrases to use that are very validating and empathetic. The L stands for listen. So I know repetitive questions drive people bazonkers. And I know it's exhausting to hear the same thing over and over and over. But I am going to ask for you to really listen. And we're listening for two things. First of all, we're listening. What are they trying to tell you? Often there are themes to what they are trying to tell you. Are they telling you things that they're worried about or they're concerned about? Are they sharing things with you that are memorable? Are they worried you're going to leave them? Are they in pain? Or do they feel useless? Do they feel unproductive? Do they feel like they're a lump on the log? Because giving them a sense of purpose is absolutely, absolutely important throughout this whole journey. And I believe it's an innate need we all have till end of life. I want to know I make a difference. I want to know I'm still important. I want to feel and know that I am still special. Super important. And often people with dementia will say things like, I don't know why I'm still here. I want to be dead. Often that will cue me in that, oh my gosh, we need to give them more of a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging. One of my clients recently just said, her husband said to her, you would be better off without me. And I asked her about her day and what kind of structure do they have in the day. And there's really not enough structure. And this was a man who was very, very, very busy with his hands. So we're adding some activities for him to do that give him the sense of purpose and a sense of belonging and accomplishment. Are they asking you or telling you they want to go home? Very common. Home is a metaphor. And I think of it as home is a way of expressing, I need to feel safe, I need to feel secure, or familiarity. And home we take literally, but home may be a home that is 50, 40 years ago, not in the home you're living in now. So very important to think metaphorically, what's home communicating to us? Let's find out what home they're referencing. And by doing that, you can ask them, tell me more about home. What do you plan on doing when you get there? What do you like the most about home? So home is a very common question that they'll ask you. Are they frustrated or angry? You're going to know by their body language, by their behaviors. Do they not like what you're doing? You're going to know that because they'll get combative. They'll get argumentative. And often they will say they want to go see someone who is deceased. Have them tell you about that person. And what do they enjoy about? What do they miss about them? What do they love about them? Have them talk to you about that person. So these are some things you want to listen for. What are the themes behind the repetitive questions? The second thing you want to listen for is what is the need? They have needs, and I'm going to go over what the 8 most common needs are. Number 1, they need reassurance and support. Number 2, they need to feel safe and secure, and they need physical care and comfort, and they need to have a sense of purpose and value. And they'll also need to be validated. Super important, they feel heard and understood. As a matter of fact, often validating them and providing that reassuring, comforting response can diffuse a situation. So super important, they feel heard and understood. And people living with dementia, because they lack that initiation, that self-starter, we have to bring things to them. We have to provide ways to engage them cognitively, socially, and also physically. So we have to create that stimulation for them when they can no longer do it themselves. So, and this also involves not asking them, do you want to take a shower? Chances are no, the answer is going to be no. So we don't ask them, do you want to? We are very strategic in how we try to foster getting them to do things. And I have what is called this inviting technique. Invite them to do things for you or with you. You know, it's so much more fun when we do this together. You are so good at doing X, Y, and Z. Could you do this with me? So I have this inviting technique, and a lot of this information is in a lot more depth and a lot more strategies. And we need to resolve their concerns. We have to find a way to communicate a reassuring and comforting response to resolve their concerns. And it may require that we change our approach. Know that they aren't doing anything intentionally to hurt you, to annoy you, to upset you, to make you angry. They are just doing the very, very best that they can as their brain is starting to deteriorate. The M in the CALM stands for meet them where they are. Meet them where they are means try to do the best you can to understand their distorted reality, their altered reality. Their brain is altered. Those brain cells are misfiring information. And so we want to do the best we can to try to understand their perspective, which is very difficult to do because we have your reality and now we're trying to juggle reality and also get to know their distortions, get to know their new reality. One of the best ways to do that, again, is to put yourself in their shoes. Imagine you were in their shoes. What do you want the other person's body language to communicate? What do you want their tone of voice to be like? What do you want to be said to you that would be very, very comforting if you were them? Also, change your expectations. This is really, really, really hard. We so badly miss the person they were. And it's so hard not to try to hang on to that and hang on to that for as long as possible. But changing your expectations means really remind yourself dementia is changing them, and dementia is going to affect the ways they think, and it's going to affect the things they say, and it's going to affect the things they do. And what's very, very, very sad about dementia is that your loved one changes, and in many ways, they may feel like they're drifting away from you. But when we can shift our expectations, it'll allow you to embrace them more where they are at, but we kind of have to find ways to let go of what was, so it opens that door for you to embrace what is. Very, very, very painful emotionally to do, but very, very possible. And you just take your time and allow yourself the time you need to make that adjustment. And then reminiscing. One of the best ways to communicate with people living with dementia is to reminisce about the old times, especially the good times. We don't want to reminisce about things that were unhappy or disturbing. Again, unless they relive that experience, we need to know it. But reminiscing is lovely. It is a beautiful way to connect with them. It is a beautiful way to have these meaningful moments with them, especially as the disease progresses. So when in doubt, reminisce. You know, you can pull out photo albums, you can talk about some places you traveled. And to tell you the truth, they're often going to ruminate about things that are very pleasurable or very happy. Those are the things too you want to reminisce about. And then give them, again, that sense of importance, purpose, and value. And you just have to modify how you do that. We have some brilliant people who are so successful in their careers, and now we just have to modify. How do we still give them that sense of purpose? How do we still make them feel important, make them feel special, make them feel somehow they're still contributing? That's just something that our soul needs, no matter how far along your loved one is in this dementia journey. That is an innate need we all have. And then also compliment them. Oh my gosh, compliments go a long way. Compliments go a long way for us, whether we have a brain disease or not. But when a person is living with dementia, compliment them. They love compliments. As a matter of fact, a lot of times compliments can also diffuse a situation, and complimenting them also is a very strategic way of engaging them in activities as well. So compliments go a long way. And then at some point, what happens as dementia progresses is that sequential memory, being able to do things in a sequence, that starts to go away. That becomes very challenging and very, very complicated. So at that point, you want to find out where and when is your loved one no longer capable of doing something. That is where we need to interject, and we have to break things down so it's simpler and it's easier. So we break things down and do one thing at a time. For example, let's say it's time for you to go to the doctor's. So you're going to say to your loved one, okay, it's time for us to go to the doctor. We need to put our shoes on, and then let's grab our coat. So you really want to break it down. Oh, time to go to the doctor. Let's put our shoes on. And you put your shoes on first, and then we go to step 2, and then we go to step 3. And we want to try to create success at each step, but this may require, again, where is the breakdown when you can no longer get your loved one to do what it is you need them to do? We may need to break it down in simpler steps and break it down step 1, step 2, and step 3. This may require demonstrating what you need them to do with them. This may require doing it with them, assisting them in the process. So break things down. So pay attention where in this process, where in the approach, where in the communication have we lost them is where we want to intercept. What do we need to do differently? And so in summary, the dementia communication goals are, first and foremost, listen, listen, listen. Listen for two things. What are the themes to what they are saying? What is the need or needs? What is it that they are communicating to you? What is it they want you to know? What is it they want you to hear? What is it they want you to understand? And to see if you can identify the feelings behind the words. Step 2 is validate, validate, validate. Again, paraphrase, repeat, reflect back to them what you hear them saying or telling you, and use the same words. And then empathize. Try to put yourself in their shoes and imagine what response, what would be reassuring, what would be comforting to hear or be told, and then make them feel special, make them feel important, give them that sense of purpose, give them that sense of value. And then also remember to speak slower, give them a little more time to process the information. And then it's be very, 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 very patient with yourselves. Trial and error. Sometimes to figure out what works is by learning from what doesn't work. And be very, very patient with yourself. There is no perfect caregiver. There's no perfect roadmap. A lot of it is trial and error. What works, what doesn't work. And ironically, what may work one day may not work another day. So you're constantly having to figure out, how to manage this dementia that's ever changing, always changing. And so please be very, very patient with yourselves. Do not beat yourself up. Don't spend time criticizing and judging yourself. Instead, be very open to learning what you can that will help tell you what you might need to do differently without judgment and without criticism. So in closing, what I'd like for all of us to do, I know everybody's mic is off, but I would love for us to read this quote by Maya Angelou out loud together. So on 3, please join me. 1, 2, and 3. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And a smile, a kiss, holding hands go a very, very long way in how it makes all of us feel. So on behalf of your loved ones, on behalf of myself, I do want to thank each and every one of you for the care, the love, and the support that you do provide day in and day out. So that concludes my part of the presentation. And I do want to give people an opportunity to ask questions. And I would like to thank all of you again for attending today's presentation. And are there any questions, Carrie?
Sure. Thanks so much, Tammy. That's so much good information. And I just find it really interesting how so many of the techniques and tips also relate back to, for me as a parent of young kids, parenting toddlers.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing, we don't want to infantilize the person, and we want to treat them with respect and dignity. But there are common things that really resonate no matter what age we're at.
Yeah.
That are super, super important.
Okay, let me check here. We got a few things in the Q&A. Okay, so someone says, my father who has dementia watches TV, hears about missing persons, and now believes that his wife, who's been dead for 2 years, is such a missing person. He tells us that she is missing and wants to search for her. What is a good response? We try to distract him, but that is not working.
So first we have to validate how concerned he is that she's missing. And validate that, okay, I know you're worried that she's missing. And then say something along the lines of, first of all, I would try to avoid and figure out other TV shows, other things to watch, so that that doesn't put thoughts in his head. But if he does go there, boy, that must be really scary to think that mom is missing. I know mom's not missing because I talked to her the other day, or I know mom, I know you're worried about mom, but mom is okay. Somehow some reassuring, comforting response. Here's where I would go for a deeper dive. And so I provide these generic responses, but if I knew this person in more detail, I could be more specific on what I'd need to say to bring him more comfort. But it's common. And again, we have to make sure, do what you can to try to avoid the missing persons thing and distract with other TV shows. But he's very concerned. Oh, I miss mom too. You know, what do you want to say to mom when you see mom? Somehow we have to normalize his concern and his worry. And then once we can normalize it, then we can try to distract. But if we try to distract and not normalize that worry, he'll constantly obsess about it.
Okay. My mother insists that she can handle her financial affairs by herself and refuses to let me be involved. Mistakes are being made. Any tips?
Yeah, that is so common. First of all, who is power of attorney for finances? If you are the power of attorney for finances, what we do a lot behind the scenes is that we will get her online banking, have access to her password, and from behind the scenes, we can manage the finances. If we don't have power of attorney, that's a whole different ball game. So as far as that goes, sometimes what we do is we have the mail forwarded to your home, and we let the junk mail go to mom. And we try to take care of some of this behind the scenes. What I don't know that I would have to ask is I'd have to get a better sense as to how far is the dementia progressed, because a lot of times we do things behind the scenes and they're not aware of it. But I need to know more about where mom's dementia is in terms of the progression. But it's a very common issue. And do what we can, because if you tell mom she can't do her finances, she's not gonna believe it. She thinks she's very equipped. So here again, we have to be sort of strategic in how we do that. And often we do it behind the scenes so we can control it, but we give her the perception, the illusion that she's still in control, but we're keeping her finances safe. Because as you all know, the scams, people just kind of hone in on these people and they get scammed very easily. So we put measures in place to protect the finances and still give mom, again, a sense that she's in control, but we're behind the scenes protecting her monies.
Okay. We do have some more questions, but just a quick note. You will receive an email with a link to this presentation if there's any information that you would like to revisit. Okay. When the loved one begins hallucinating that there are kids or pets in the house, how do you respond without arguing?
We usually join the hallucination. Depending again, now we take a lot of our cues off of them. If they're not afraid, if they are happy and they're having these hallucinations, we'll join the hallucinations with them. Now, if they're disturbed and upset, then we interact with that a little differently. But a lot of times the hallucinations are either animals or kids. And if they're not disturbed by it, then, tell us more about what you see. Is there anything you want me to say to them? Do you want me to tell the dog to go home? We'll interact with it again to bring some comfort but telling them, oh, they're not there, and their brain's telling them it's there, then we want to try to align with them. But if it's very disturbing and it's very upsetting, then we have to be a little more strategic in how we diffuse and interact with that. So again, I'm providing generic answers because I don't know the specifics, and the specifics help me kind of, be able to tailor better responses. But these are just some generic ways of addressing these questions.
Okay, for a young couple traveling via car from California to Florida with a dad with early to moderate dementia, do you have any advice that you would give them?
Yeah, it's a long way.
cross-country road trip.
Yeah, so a couple things. Let's know what the distractions are. I would make sure we have a ton of snacks in the car. I would also make sure that you take enough pit stops, change of scenery, get out of the car, because what I don't know is as dementia progresses, they're going to have limitations, and those limitations are going to vary. So I think I would build in, frequent stops, make sure we have food. So if their blood sugar drops, we've got snacks in the car. What distractions are good? Are there songs we could sing? Are there songs we could play? It is a long, long, long drive for someone with dementia. And fortunately, they're on the earlier side, it's earlier dementia, but build in stops, again, have snacks, have distractions, play music, reminisce. I don't know if there's any books this person likes, of course, don't want to get them car sickness, but tap into those things that are interesting to them, that make them happy, and we'll have to capitalize on those things.
My mother has become less and less verbal. How can I get her to talk to me a little bit more?
So that is really can be very sad. Maybe we won't talk so much via words, but maybe we can talk more in terms of nonverbal, holding hands, maybe singing music, maybe, reading a card. You could write down in a card and just read to her. But I think I would focus more now on the nonverbal ways of connecting and communicating, and not focus so much on the words. And always you say, I love you, I'm thinking about you, I love spending time with you, because it gets very, very difficult for them when they lose that ability to communicate. So we can switch gears you can be more communicative by expressing, I love you, I'm thinking of you, I love spending time with you, and not expect anything back in return. But I bet if you say those things, you're going to see a facial expression that you may see a smile. But again, nonverbal is another form of communication that we'll want to tap into at that point.
Okay, I think this might be the last question. Somebody is wondering if there is a list of online groups that meet at no cost.
There are support groups that meet at no cost. Alzheimer's Association has a lot of support groups. And if you type in your zip code, then you'll know which groups are in the area. Also, there's a lot of groups where they do them via webinars as well. But definitely the Alzheimer's Association. I'm not sure Family Caregiver Alliance, they may also have caregiver support groups at no cost. And then I do a national Q&A every Monday evening, Monday afternoon here, 4:00, between 4 and 5, ask the expert questions. So that's another resource. So those are some good resources you could look into in terms of support group. And I do my own support groups as well, but mine do cost.
Okay. And if somebody wanted more information about your personal counseling sessions, would they just contact you through your website?
Yep, they can contact me through my website, send me an email, or you can always call me as well.
Okay.
And then a lot of this information and a lot more is in my book. So I highly recommend. My book would be a wonderful resource to deal with the numerous challenges and changes that you will experience and your loved one experiences as the disease progresses.
All right. I think we are just almost out of time, and it looks like we covered everyone's questions for today.
Okay.
So thanks so much for attending. Thanks so much for presenting. I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. And the questions were great. And everybody have a nice evening, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Carrie.
Bye-bye.